Buried next to me is Fred T. Dubois, a brilliant early politician of Idaho Territory and the reason why the state looks like what it does today. He created the Anti-Mormon Party of Oneida County in 1879, which was more or less engaged with a political revolt against Mormon influence in the southern part of the state. The story of Idaho Territory as a political entity begins in 1862 when gold was discovered in South Idaho, and immediately the first people to discover gold there started advocating for a separate territory. It would be difficult to enforce territorial law in this remote part of Washington Territory when the capital was so far away. But as the years passed, Mormons started settling in the southern part of the territory and voting in a Democrat bloc. They would vote for the Democrat Party. And this really irked a lot of non-Mormons to the south because at that point in time, really the largest influence there economically was agricultural. The mines had moved further north with the discovery of gold in the Panhandle. And so a lot of people in Idaho Territory government decided to advocate for creating a new border, which stretched from the Cascade Mountains of Washington over to the Idaho Panhandle. It would have looked something like this. But a lot of people realized, among which Fred T. Dubois, that there were a lot of anti-Mormon farmers, a lot of non-Mormon farmers in the Deep South that wanted to not fall underneath the territorial flag of Utah. They still wanted to be a part of Idaho Territory. So Fred T. Dubois, in 1879, founds the Anti-Mormon Party of Oneida County. Well, in 1882, he's appointed territorial marshal by Washington, D.C., and in his memoirs he writes that at that moment he realized Washington, D.C. wanted him and his anti-Mormon party to be the influence which stamped out Mormonism politically in that part of Idaho. So the anti-Mormon party operated in tandem with the law enforcement of this region. Dubois was the marshal, which would enforce their laws, and the Republican Party adopted the platform of the Anti-Mormon Party and began passing them. The first law, 1884, banned Mormons from serving in the territorial legislature. 1 year after that, they banned Mormons from serving on juries. And because the Constitution says you can have a jury of your peers, when they would arrest you for polygamy, generally it would go to a settlement in southern Idaho that was filled with Mormons. So they on the jury would just say, constitutionally, we recognize freedom of religion and we're going to find you not guilty. But now that they can't serve on juries, they don't have that privilege anymore. And this was part of an effort to just drive them out through jail time, through political influence, and through even physical intimidation. So the day after this law was passed, Dubois, as a marshal who had created the party only a few years prior, he decides to launch a mass raid on the town of Paris, Idaho, which was at the time, and still is, a large Mormon community, a settlement. And he arrests pretty much every Mormon man. And because of this, on his grave, he's marked down as a champion of women's rights. He viewed this as protecting the women from polygamist marriages. So he created for himself a career in the territory that was very favorable to Washington, D.C., who was opposed to Mormonism and mainly to polygamy at the time. For the next 30-something years, he would work with the U.S. government, mainly out of Washington, D.C., and from 1890 onwards, he served as a first senator of Idaho after it was granted statehood status. And because of his influence in alienating the Mormons as a voting bloc in southern Idaho, that's the reason why Idaho has a southern border where it is nowadays with Utah. It could be much further north.